Hey guys, welcome to Rebuilding the Beast. I'm your host, Bessa Zazili, NBA player turned podcast host. And on this show, I'm going to have a lot of my inspiring friends come on to share with you their rebuilding journeys. I hope you can take the tips from their lives and apply it to your life as well. Oh, and don't forget to hit subscribe, like, comment, share with a friend. All the things. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Welcome to Rebuilding the Beast. We have Alexa Towersey today, all the way from Australia.
Australia, indeed. I know. G'day.
Hi. Celebrity trainer, nutrition and lifestyle coach, sports model. In 2015, you had arthritis in your hip and you got hip replacements. And during that time, you had to be resuscitated 4 times.
Yeah, if you're going to do something, man, do it well.
Do it well. Oh my gosh. Body double for top American fitness model Victoria Pratt.
Yeah.
Qualified for the Ironman 70.3. What is we gonna get into all that?
Oh, look, it's just a really fancy way of saying like a half Ironman. So it's not like the real beast at Kona. It's kind of like the one level down.
Okay, I don't know a lot of people who have signed up for any kinds of Ironman, the half or the full. So we're gonna get into all that. But the thing that really caught me is that your mantra is, "I will no longer allow myself to be treated poorly."
Yeah. That was a big one. Actually came off the back of a string of dating disasters. So not even in my fitness life, but it just kind of became a mantra for everything else. And, fitness has played, or strength training has played such a huge role in me developing the way I feel about myself day to day, and that started when I was 15 and I had very, very, very low self-esteem. And, 2 things happened. One, I was being bullied at school for being too skinny. So my nickname back then was Alexa Anorexia, because kids are really awesome.
Wow.
And my mum was also diagnosed with manic depression or bipolar. And the gym for me, like the weights room, it became this sanctuary, this safe place, this place where I found my first sense of self, my first sense of connection. And it was a place where I sort of really began to understand the connection between what it was like to develop physical strength and then the mental toughness and the resilience that came alongside that. And that has driven everything I've done to this day.
It's kind of crazy to hear you say Alexa and Alexa and also see pictures of you today, right? You are this beast. And so let's go back and rebuild the beast, baby.
If only the haters could see me flex now. I know.
For sure. Let's talk about it. How did training come into your life, especially coming from a place when you were really skinny?
I think every time, and this is what I always say to people as well, you'd be familiar with this. I think every time something really shitty happens to you, or you face adversity, or you're going through a really rough time, you can make a choice at that particular moment in time. You can choose to be a victim, which is sometimes the easiest thing to do, or you can choose to fight back. And I just don't think I ever really had it in me to just lay down and die. Like, I come from a military family. My mum was a medic in the British Army, specializing in gunshot wounds. My dad was a major in the British Army. He went off to war and fought in the Falklands. I grew up in the military, and I don't think I ever had a quitter's mentality. Like, I sort of grew up just being like, well, okay, cool. There's this challenge that's come up. How do I feel about it? Well, that sucks. How am I going to get through it? What am I going to do about it? How can I be better? And right from 15, that's what I did. Like, some really awful things happened. My mum being diagnosed with a mental illness so early on, she became a complete stranger. I didn't have any familial support. I sort of became the parent in that situation because my dad turned to drink to cope with it. The gym for me was kind of like that escape, and it gave me that strength. And it was, the bullying was kind of like the epiphany that I was like, okay, I've got all these crappy things happening now. I don't feel strong. How do I fix that? I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to get strong. And that's what happened.
I don't think that says a lot about you as a person, because that's not normal. A lot of people go through.
Yeah.
No, I said because a lot of people go through tough times, and there is a woe is me mentality, or you become what you see, right? You see your dad drinking, or you see your mom in the state that she was in, and you feel like that's where I'm destined to be. So what took you away from that? Is there someone that grabbed you and said, no, you're meant for more? Or did you just always have it in you that wasn't going to be you?
I didn't have any role models growing up. And it's always really interesting because I always get asked that question, like, who were your role models? I didn't have anyone. I had to be the role model. Like, I had to be the person that dug me out of the hole. Um, Going to the gym helped me because I was all of a sudden, I found a community that was sort of more inspiring. They were more empowering. They were more supportive than my at home family. And like I said, like, it was interesting because every single thing that happened, like I got bullied at school for being too skinny, so I went to the gym on a mission for muscles. My mum was diagnosed with a mental illness. She tried to take her life when I was 17 and I intervened. And that experience, that journey shaped me in the way that I chose to become a mental health advocate. I chose to go on and share my story so that anybody else in that situation would have a story to go back to and go, okay, well, she did it. I can do this. Like, there is support. I'm not alone. I can reach out and ask for help. And then when my dad drank as a sense of, that was his sense of connection, that was his escapism. I also drank. Like, I found the gym, that was my first sense of connection, but I found my dad's whiskey bottle too. And for a long period of time, I had this duality of life where I was going to the gym during the week and being the healthiest version of myself. And then I was binge drinking the weekend because I wanted to feel connected and accepted by my peers. But when he died of alcoholism, I made the decision that sobriety was going to be the next journey. That was the other choice that was made. And that's probably the choice that really ultimately shaped where I would end up.
Do you have any idea what your dad was dealing with at the time that also maybe you can have some? Was there a way for you to have empathy for his journey because you also grabbed the bottle and understood like you were trying to fit into a society that, you know, I don't really know how I'm asking this question. So let me start over, okay? So
I know where you're getting at. Yeah.
no, but like I feel like um do you feel like your dad, sorry, I'm still jet lagged, so my brain is trying to do some things
That's
here.
right.
Um do you have any empathy for your dad and what he was going through because you also had that same situation. You grabbed the bottle as well. What is your thought now that you've got out of it? What do you feel about that whole situation now about him?
Oh, God, hindsight is a beautiful thing, isn't it? Absolutely, I have empathy. And for me, like, even if I look at my mum's situation, like back in those days, and I sound really old when I say that, back in those days, like, there was absolutely no awareness around mental health or mental illness or suicide. And like, depression wasn't even a textbook recognized disease. There was no help, there was no support, there was no guidance on the right things to say or the right things to do, or these are the avenues of support you have, and this is how you help somebody who's going through something significant. And both my parents were going through something significant. My mum, obviously her struggle culminated in a suicide attempt. And after that, dad sort of medicated. His way was to try and escape because he had also been trying to hold up the entire family. So I absolutely have empathy. I wish I'd known then what I know now. And I wish I'd had the tools then that I have now, because it would have meant that I would have dealt with the situation differently. It would have meant that I would have been able to give my mum the love and support that she deserved, because I really didn't understand what was happening. And because I was young and I was having to deal with both parents who were having their own struggles, I sort of became the parent, and I sort of saw both of them as very weak, and I didn't understand. It took me a long time to get to a place where I sort of forgave myself for how I treated them, especially my mum. And, with my dad, I remember getting to a point, like, I was at university and I'd gone around to see how he was, and he was drunk. Like, he went from a functioning alcoholic to a plain old alcoholic to having liver cirrhosis as a direct consequence of being an alcoholic. And the journey was heartbreaking to watch. Like, he just got sicker and sicker and sicker. He couldn't even come to Christmas, Christmas morning, because he had withdrawals. He was shaking that much. He hadn't had his glass of whiskey in the morning. And I remember going around to his place and him saying to me, "Hey, can you take me to the alcohol store?" And I was like, "No, I'm not taking you to the alcohol store. Like, you're already drunk. You don't need any more. I'm not taking you. I'm not going to be an enabler." And he basically was like, "Well, if you don't take me, I'm going to drive myself. And he was drunk. And it was kind of that moment where you realize you're like, wow, okay, I can't guilt this person out of addiction. I can't shame them out of it. I can't love them out of it. I either have to choose here to sort of take the path of least resistance. Do I want a relationship with my dad? Because if I want a relationship with my dad, I have to accept this is who he is now. And it sucks for me and I hate it. But that's the only choice there is. And that was sort of the choice I made because, we got into a screaming fit over it. I was like, don't you understand that you're killing yourself? Don't you understand that you're never going to walk me down the aisle or see me get married or give a father speech at my wedding? Like, you're killing yourself. You're never going to see any grandkids. Like, this is the path that you've chosen. Do you understand? And he was like, Alexa, I wish I could tell you I loved you enough to quit, but I can't. Like, he just couldn't see past that. And it's like you kind of get to a path where you're like, well, okay, I love this person. This is my, this is my person. This is my parent. And if I walked away from this, how would I feel about that later on? And, aside from the sharing of stories, the other big thing that I've learned and the big thing that I live by is that nobody ever regrets being the bigger person, ever. Like, ever. You don't. You could have the worst situation in the world, but if you do the right thing by your own moral compass, regardless of how hard it is for you, you never, ever regret those decisions.
My question to that, and by the way, I really love that. That's really true. You never regret being a bigger person. But at this point, at least at the start, you're a teenager
Yeah.
when you're having to be the parent. Did you have somebody else there? Did you have somebody else there who was an older person? Did you have professionals that could also intervene in those cases? Well, who was around
Nobody.
you?
Like my parents' friends, but my parents' friends, like, again, back in those days, because there was no awareness, no one was having conversations like this. Like, if you asked me what my dad thought about the situation with my mum, I have absolutely no idea because we never had a conversation about what was happening. Not even after my mum's suicide attempt. We never spoke about it. And it's one of those things, like, even when I go into schools now and I'm talking about mental health, the whole I'm fine scenario comes into play. And it's so like, I've never come across two more potentially toxic words because I'm fine is sort of what I would say to everybody else back then. I'm fine is what my dad would tell all his workmates when he had too many sick days and they started noticing that he wasn't around as much. I'm fine was what my mum said to me right before she tried to take her life. So that was kind of like those words governed our existence. And it was just kind of like a fake it till you make it type scenario, you know? Not a face it till you make it, like you literally were faking it till you make it. And I think for me, I followed in my dad's footsteps a little bit because while I was still going to the gym, alcohol definitely became a huge coping mechanism for me because at that point, having no role models around me, having no support system, I desperately wanted to be accepted by the people around me. I desperately wanted to fit into this other community because I had nobody. And that was my way in. So drinking became the escape. And that governed like a huge portion of my life up until my dad died. And then at 29 when I quit.
Tell me about the last time you drank. You've been 14 years sober now, and tell me
I
about the
have.
point. That point that was
I
like, I can't do this anymore.
I went to my dad's funeral. I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and that place is like party central, like 24/7. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want to do
Really?
it. Yeah, oh my God. It's one of the craziest places I've ever lived in my entire life. But I was living in Hong Kong. My dad was back in New Zealand. And I, when you've got two parents who are really sick, you just spend your entire life waiting for that phone call. You can't turn your phone off at night because one or the other, like something's going to happen. At some point in time that phone's going to ring and that's going to be the decision that changes your life again. And I got the call while I was in a chicken shop trying to get my dinner on the way home from work one night. And I just lost it in this chicken shop in front of all these people. And you know, some random Hong Kong person came out from behind the counter and started hugging me and didn't really know what was happening, but just knew I was distraught. But I flew out a couple of days later to go to his funeral. And I went to his funeral. I drank his last bottle of whiskey. I danced on the bar that we had, sort of the after function, I guess, the reception after the funeral. danced on the bar, fell off the bar, threw up all over myself, fell in a ditch, missed my flight home, and then woke up the next day. And it's I said to my then partner, I was like, I am never drinking again, like ever drinking again. And he was like, yeah, whatever, like rolls his eyes at me, starts laughing. He's like, until next weekend. And I think up until that point, we'd had this conversation so many times. And there are so many people out there that can relate. Like everybody has these self-loathing Sundays where you don't know what you've done the night before. You've blacked out. You've said something stupid. You've made an ass out of yourself. You feel horrendous when you wake up and you're like, oh my God, I'm never doing this again until the next weekend. And that was what my life was sort of like. And I was like, no, I'm serious. Like I'm really serious this time. I'm not doing this. I'm not being my dad. I'm not going to put somebody else through that journey. Like it's not worth it. And I went back to Hong Kong and I never touched another drop, like ever. And I think for me, well, for a lot of people, the sad reality is when it comes to addiction, is that often you really do have to hit rock bottom. Like you have to understand that the consequences of what you're doing are going to be so bad for you. In my case, there's no question in my mind that had I continued to drink, I would have died just like my dad. You have to understand that the consequences are going to be so bad that you have no other alternative. And for me, watching him die, I was looking at my future and I didn't like what I saw. And that was the turning point.
Was it hard? Even after that, you made a decision. Was it hard quitting cold turkey?
100%. Being sober was probably one of the hardest things I have ever done, especially initially. Like I didn't go out for 6 months. It still amazes me how confrontational it can be for the people around you when you make decisions about your own life that they feel indirectly challenge their own lifestyle choices. And at the time when I was living in Hong Kong, a lot of the people I was surrounded with, like you didn't ask someone out for coffee, you didn't ask them out for a juice, you didn't ask them to go for a walk. It was like, do you want to come for a drink at the bar? That was pretty much all there was in terms of connecting with people. And so when you take away that common denominator, it's like, well, what else am I going to talk to with this person? Like, what else do we have in common? And it was kind of like, for lack of a better term, it was sort of social suicide for me overnight. Like I lost entire groups of friends. It was the beginning of the end of my relationship because of course I had met my then partner out while I was drunk. And so you took away one of the things that we originally bonded over. And it was like, oh, wow, but now we have to find other things to connect with. And that's when I actually got into half Ironman. So that's, again, like sort of fitness saved my life in that respect, because for me, I wasn't strong enough in who I was at that particular moment in time when I just quit to really stay true to my course. And I remember one of the first times, like in the first, couple of weeks, when the routine was to go out on a Friday night after you finish work, and I'd be sitting at home and I was like so angry and so frustrated and so anxious. And I happened to meet a girl through like the gym community in Hong Kong who'd been through 4 years of drug and alcohol rehab. And I remember saying to her, like, I was like, how do you do this? Like, how do you deal with all these emotions? Because I have no outlet. How do you deal with all this stuff? And she was like, you need to find a purpose, like something greater than yourself. And I was like, okay. So I think it was like within a week, I had joined a triathlon club. And I figured out pretty quickly that I was pretty good at triathlon. Terrible swimmer because Jaws ruined my life and I never wanted to get in the water. But I hired a swim coach and within within 2.5 years, I'd sort of qualified for the world champs. And I used that 2.5 years to really knuckle down on who I was and what I wanted out of my life. And in the meantime, I'd found this new focus. I'd found a purpose, something to get out of bed for in the morning. I'd found something to do on the weekend, so I wasn't sitting at home with absolute FOMO while everyone else, they were out partying. But more importantly, I'd found this entirely new social circle who absolutely understood what it was that I was trying to do and wanted to support me to be better. And that's something that I try and get across to people now. Like, you are who you hang with. If you're hanging with people who are always making poor choices and who don't care about looking after themselves, then that's going to translate over to you. You're going to start making those choices and you're going to start not caring about yourself either. But I bought into what they were selling. And, now my group of friends, Uber Alexa is the best designated driver around. They're at the bar getting me a soft drink or a glass of water before I've even had to ask. And those are the people that you want around you, you know? So I'm very lucky that I found them.
That's what I was gonna ask. Like, couldn't you have gone to the bar with your partner and not drink back then?
I could have, but that was very, very difficult. It's a bit like we live in a culture where it's far more normal to be shit faced than it is to be sober. And it can get very confronting when somebody really questions your choices. You know, if you're standing, I'm sure you've got plenty of experiences, like especially being an athlete. And, you know, if I look at the athletic culture in Australia, the sporting culture in Australia and New Zealand, you go out and after a game, everybody's celebrating. How do the teams bond? They go out and have drinks together. So I would be one of a handful of people at a bar, stone cold sober. And then it's always like, come on, stop being so boring. Like, when did you become the boring one? One drink's not going to hurt you, you know? And it gets exhausting having to answer those questions all the time. Like, you have to justify the choices you're making about your own life. And that's why I say, like, you have to know your why. You have to know why you are making those decisions, because until I was really rooted in the decision of like, this is my life now. This is the decision I've made. And it doesn't matter what you guys say to me. I'm so happy with who I am now. I know what I stand for. I know what I want. And I am completely fine standing here stone cold sober while you do your thing. It does not affect me. But it wasn't an overnight process. Like, it took me a while to get to that point.
All right, so I have to give a trigger warning because we're going to talk about suicide.
Hmm.
You've talked openly about how your mom tried to commit suicide and how you even tried. And let's talk about mental health. Why do you think there are so many negative misconceptions about mental health?
In my experience, look, it's much better. We are aeons ahead of where we were back then. Um, and that is through the likes of like you and I and other people within the space being very open about sharing our stories, because sharing stories is what gives people hope that there is something on the other side of that. Like, they're not stuck in this really desolate and lonely place that they're in. Mental health, in my, you know, I only have to look at addiction for that. It's if you look at addiction, the opposite of addiction isn't necessarily sobriety, it's connection. People are always looking for connection. So when people are experiencing significant health challenges, for the most part, they feel very isolated and very alone. And I can only talk, you know, from my experience, but back in those days, it was kind of like nobody understood what mental health was. Nobody understood what mental illness was. And it was just seen as this big, scary thing. And even now, to a certain degree, like, you think about how you ask someone how they are on a daily basis. We're so conditioned to be like, how are you? I'm fine. You've answered the question before you've even checked in with how you're really feeling. You've asked the question, but you're so busy that you're not necessarily, even if the intent is genuine, you're so busy that you haven't necessarily stuck around to hear the answer. We get so conditioned to having these question answer sessions without even thinking about how it is that we're really feeling. And imagine if one day you ask that question, someone goes, I'm not good. I'm not good at all. Like, I'm in a really bad place and, you know, I don't want to be here anymore. Holy shit. Like, where do you
We don't
go
know
from
what to
that
do.
conversation? Exactly. And I think a big part of not wanting to have those conversations is people fear that by having the weight of the world put on their shoulders, they're not going to be able to deal with it, and they are going to cause harm to that person by saying or doing the wrong thing. When in reality, if your intent is genuine and you're coming from a place of care, really nothing that you say or do is going to put that person in further danger, because by showing that you care, you're really giving them a safe space, and you're sort of opening the door for them to reach out and connect further. So, you know, it's been seen as this big scary beast where nobody really knows all the answers and they don't want to fail, because failure in that scenario is terrifying. But you can't fail if you care.
Let's talk about care. Were there signs that you wish you paid attention to in regards to your mom? Is there ways that you felt like you could have shown care more or anything that just, and this is in regards to anybody out there who has a family member who is dealing with um, mental health issues or who has attempted suicide?
Look, I think yes is the answer to the question. At that point in time, I don't think I was ready to deal with any of it. So I wasn't looking for any of them. And that's the most honest answer I can give you. And that kills me to this day. It's easier when you don't understand. Again, it's this big, terrifying, scary thing. Someone is supposed to be your parent. And I was like, oh my God, I can't deal with any of this. I don't know what's happening. Why am I suddenly the parent in the situation? Why do I have to deal with this? I don't understand. I'm going to take a step back. Um, Nowadays, like when I go into schools or, communities to talk about mental health, there isn't like one thing that you are looking for. There are so many signs and symptoms that someone could be experiencing a mental health challenge or living with a mental illness. And part of the human experience is that we're privy to all these incredible emotions. And not all of them are beautiful. Like, not every day is sunshine and roses. Everybody is going to face adversity, and you could be having a really
Mm.
bad day. What we want to do is make sure that that bad day doesn't turn into a bad week and into a bad month and into a bad life. Like things like loss of joy or anxiety or change in sleeping patterns, all of these things can be associated with somebody who is living with a mental illness, but they could also be a symptom of someone who's just having a really bad day. What we generally tell people now is that you're looking for a significant and dramatic change in behavior. So if you know somebody really well and they suddenly start acting not like themselves, like the life of the party doesn't want to get out of bed in the morning, or the star basketball player doesn't want to come to training, that's a dramatic change in behavior. And if it's over sort of a significant period of time, like around the 2-week mark, and you're like, man, they are not themselves, that's when you kind of start having to go, if you haven't already, what's going on here? And there are some really simple ways to open up a conversation. Like we just had Are You Okay Day? Are you okay? Is a really easy way to open up the question. And if you don't like the look or the sound of their answer, you can absolutely ask that question again. Are you really okay though? And that's where sometimes, like, even sharing experiences, when you start sharing your own story, you start talking about a challenge that you faced, invariably it empowers somebody else to think, okay, cool, this is a really safe space. Maybe I could have a conversation here. It could be as simple as just acknowledging that they haven't, seemed themselves lately. Like you seem a bit down, you've been a bit quiet lately. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Or it could just be a text message being like, hey mate, I haven't seen you in a while. You know, how's everything going? If you ever want a coffee, I'm here. There are so many ways that you can open up a chat really indirectly and really non-confrontationally, so it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. Um, but yeah, like you have to take care of yourself. And by taking care of yourself, then you can sort of take care of your mates.
I got a question for you, and it just
Mm.
came to me as you were saying these, telling your story. Do you ever have this feeling when you're telling your story and you're telling a story about traumas from the past? Do you ever have a feeling um, like you're living those moments? Is there ever a feeling of pain reliving those moments, or have you healed over time? And if you have healed over time, how did you do that? But if not, and you still feel pain, what does that feel like?
I think there's always going to be pain. There's always going to be grief. It's interesting. I listened to a podcast yesterday actually by Human Lab, and he was talking about grief, and it was like, how do you explain grief? And it's sort of, it's in his, like, from scientific terms, it's one of those things where it's like you've turned like an actionable item, something that somebody, in the case of a person, like somebody that you interact with every day, somebody that you look for connection with, somebody that you look for support with, all of a sudden it's an inactionable item. You don't get to have those conversations anymore. You can't have that connection. You can no longer seek out that person and have those experiences or have those emotions, or feel that two-way love. But I think I'm at a point now where I've shared my story to the point where it's cathartic for me. And I remember the first time I got up on stage and shared my story, and I'd never ever told anyone about my mum's suicide attempt. And I burst out crying and forgot my whole keynote and stood up on a stage in front of 400 people being like, oh my God, and now where do I go from this? You know?
Wow.
And it was a
I do want to
real,
know. Wait, tell me where did you go from there?
well, I just had to keep talking. I was like, I was crying and I was like, you have to forgive me. This was a really dark period of my bit, it was a really dark period for me. And I just told the truth from there on in. I went way off key and I just started talking about how the death had affected me and how I hadn't forgiven myself for her. It turned into more of a therapy session for me. But, at the end of it, you're kind of going, oh my God, these poor people, they're sitting here listening to an absolute train wreck of a talk. But
No,
like
it's
4
got
or
to be
5 people
powerful.
came up to me at the end and they were just like, I've never seen such raw honesty. And it really made me reevaluate the relationship with my parents, like, because they were going through something really similar. And so, hearing that and seeing that firsthand, that helps you heal. Seeing other people be affected and then choosing to reach out and ask for help, that helps you heal. Knowing that there is hope for other people helps you heal. And then, invariably you're talking to people who've got similar shared experiences to you. And they're also reassuring you that you also need to forgive yourself. And like it took me, I don't think I forgave myself. Like after mum's passing, like she didn't even die of mental illness in the end. Like her passing was actually very sudden. So we had a very strange relationship after her suicide attempt. Like I just didn't know how to communicate with her. I didn't know how to love her really well. I moved overseas. She stayed back in New Zealand, and we really had limited contact. And it had been a couple of years, and I'd spoken to a couple of people, and I really, at the back of my mind, there was always this broken bridge. I knew I didn't have a great relationship with my mum. I knew that I didn't have the same connection that a lot of my friends had with their families. I wasn't a tight-knit group at all. And it was always in the back of my head. And I remember when I was sort of going through the whole no alcohol process. And, someone just says something one day about their family, and it just really triggered something in me. And I was like, right, I need to mend this bridge. I need to mend this bridge to heal because I'm broken. A part of me is broken, and I'm trying to fill this void of connection by going out and drink. I need to build the bridge. And I rang my mum on the Friday and I couldn't get hold of her because I'd made the decision. I was like, right, I'm going to ring my mum. I'm going to tell her I love her, and I'm going to make a commitment to ring her at least once a week from then on in and tell her I love her, because I do not want her to feel alone. I don't want her to feel alone like I feel alone. And I rang on the Friday. I couldn't get hold of her. On the Monday, I got a call from my dad, who basically said that she'd been in hospital. She had been cleaning the ceiling and she'd fallen off the ladder and punctured her lung. She'd ended up in hospital. She didn't want to call anybody because she didn't want to worry anybody. She didn't want to put me out. She didn't want to cause concern. And so she'd sat there. She'd gone to hospital again, told dad not to call me. They'd aspirated her lung. They released her out on the Monday and she passed away 4 hours later, and I didn't get to say goodbye. And yeah, it was one of those moments where you're like, I should have built the bridge. And this is where I come back to the whole no one ever regrets being the bigger person, because that is the only thing in my life that I regret. The only thing is not saying goodbye to her. And when I see people now, like every Christmas invariably, or, different Father's Day or Mother's Day, I've got a bunch of people around me, and there's always one or two that are having trouble with their family and they've had arguments or they're not talking to someone. I'm like, you know what? Like, be the bigger person. Don't be the person that leaves and has something happen and then have that massive regret. Because that was the biggest thing that I had to forgive myself for, is not building the bridge before she died. So yeah, like it's the grief over that still overwhelms me, but in her passing and in all the things that I've been through, like I said, everything that you go through, you get to make a decision about where that adversity takes you. Like, in which direction do you choose to grow through that? And every single thing that I've been through with her, the mental health struggles that she experienced, I was like, I'm going to share my story in the hope that somebody else hears it and doesn't feel alone so that they can make better choices and not live with the regret. And that's what I've done. And over the process, that's helped heal me. So I healed by helping other people. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that we get. You know, we have the ability to heal other people. We have the ability to help other people. We have the ability to inspire and empower and educate other people. I just wish more of us were choosing to do that.
I'm really proud of you for doing that with your story, with your vulnerability. That's not an easy thing to do. The mantra for this podcast is God gave you your mountains so you can show others it can be moved. And you have challenges. We all have challenges. But like you said, it's about how you use those challenges to further you in whatever way you get to choose, right? I'm going to switch gears a little bit because
Cool.
you are a woman of many talents. You are a celebrity trainer, a sports model, writer, honestly, so much more. Where do you find time to take moments for yourself and focus inward?
Ooh. God, that's a really good question. Wherever I can is the answer to that. I actually wrote a post on this the other day. One of the biggest things I get all the time being like in the coach version of myself is that I don't have time. I don't have time to stretch. I don't have time to train. I don't have time to eat a healthy dinner. I don't have time to go for a walk. Well, nobody has time, but you have to make time for your health, or you're going to have to make time for your sickness at some point. Um, if you like, if we look at meditation as a prime example, I think, I'm a terrible meditator. If someone tells me to shut up and sit quietly in a corner, not good at it, don't like it, don't want to bar of it. But I can get into meditation in the form of like, okay, I'm about to sip this beautiful cup of coffee. Can I take a deep breath, inhale, and be grateful for the fact that it's awesome and I'm going to feel great afterwards? Yes, I can. Is that a moment of gratitude? Absolutely it is. Is it a moment of positive visualization, imagining that I'm going to feel awesome afterwards? It absolutely is. So I think there are always ways to fit in a breath or 5 minutes or a phone call to someone that you feel great speaking to afterwards. It's about finding, like, self-care for me is about finding all the things in life that bring you joy, whether they're 5 minutes or 5 days, doesn't matter. All the things in life that bring you joy, and then trying to do them more often. And that could literally be as simple as enjoying your morning cup of coffee. So I think people overcomplicate. They want the magic pills. They want to think that some secret practice of 25 minutes of some random breath work is going to make them more grateful or more joyous or more happy. But in reality, it really is just a case of like taking deep breaths at certain times during the day and just remembering to be grateful for the things that you do have. Because the more things that you remember you are grateful for, the less you choose to think about the stuff that you don't have or that you want.
Is it crazy to think that that young girl
Mm.
that people were making fun of, and you said it earlier in the podcast, you said, yeah, I wish they could see me now. And they probably do. They probably do see you and they are in awe. But now you're a sports model and now you're a fitness trainer. Tell me about the inspiration there. Tell me about deciding to make both those a career path.
I think it just sort of came naturally. There's always, there's that saying that's like, when you find, what is it? When you're doing what you love, you never work a day in your life. I don't believe that, because I love what I do and I love fitness. But when I go to the gym and I'm having to coach clients, I'm like, this is work. And some of it is hard work. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I absolutely think that find something that gives you purpose and find something that you feel rewarded for. And for me, helping people has just always come naturally. I've always wanted to be that person. And I was just really interested in fitness. I didn't make it a full-time career until I went to Hong Kong. And I ended up, funnily enough, meeting a boy over there. I went on a 1-year contract. I met a boy over there who was an ex-footy player, an ex-fighter, and he owned a mixed martial arts gym. And he was sort of there right the way through. Like I met him when I was drunk, and he watched me, obliterate myself every weekend. And then, I was training at his gym, and he was giving me some PT sessions because that's what good boyfriends do. And he was like, you're really fit. People like chatting to you. You're really good at what you do. You have a wealth of knowledge. Why don't you let me train you up, and then you can start taking clients? And that's kind of how it started for me. And it was definitely not an easy process. Like before I was in fitness full time, I was working in 3 bars doing PR, which is why I was drunk all of the time. Like, for 6 months straight when I first moved to Hong Kong, I just got drunk. I put on 10 kgs. I was the unhealthiest version of myself. When I drank, I smoked. Like, it was awful. I was just like the shadow of myself. And when I started, I couldn't afford to just not work and go to work at the gym. So I sort of did a lot of interning wherever I could spend time. I was down at the gym, just learning, just watching his trainers, watching the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes run, watching the corporate boxing classes run, having a look at how he ran his time and teaching kids and teaching the corporates. And then I just started working at the gym. So from 5 till 8 in the morning, I would take on clients for free because I wanted the experience. And then I would finish work in the office at 5, and then from 6 to 9 at night, I would go back to the gym and I would take more clients for free because I wanted to make the switch over. And, I would sit in my lunchtime and Google hardest workouts known to man because I was the only female trainer at this mixed martial arts gym. And I was like, I am
Yeah,
not
I
going to be
gotta
the
prove
easy one.
myself.
I got to prove myself. Yeah. So these corporate guys would come in, and God help them, by the end of it, like they were on the floor. But for them, that was a great workout. And like that's how it started. I just loved seeing it. I loved seeing the thrashing. I loved seeing how much damage and pain I could inflict in 45 minutes. Like that is how the career started. But they would always come back for more because for them, that was kind of like, that was their 45 minutes out of their day. And that is how they were choosing to spend it. And it just became a privilege. These guys they have these crazy lives, but they're choosing to spend the 145 minutes of their day that they get to themselves with you. Make it a good 45 minutes. And I just loved what I did. And invariably, as you go along, I got into Half Ironman. I came across Jim Jones. I don't know if you've heard of them, not the cult. They're an outfit in Utah. They were run by a guy called Mark Twight. He was sort of like a mountaineer. He trained all the guys for like 300, the Immortal, Superman. And I'd come across it, and it was like the secret society of gyms. And I just got into Half Ironman, and I was like, man, their whole mantra was mindset is primary. And I was like, I love this mantra. This is awesome. This is going to give me the edge. And every year I decided I was going to go to Utah and train. So I applied to go to this little secret society gym. And every year I would go there, and they would put me through the most hideous of workouts. And publicly, like they'd pull out a bike into the middle of the floor in front of all these guys, like just on a Friday afternoon, and be like, Alexa's going to do this workout now, and she's going to show you guys how it's done. And I'd be like, and you'd just have to do it because that was what was done. You didn't have a choice because failure and quitting was not an option. So I just got addicted to that feeling of always being challenged and how fitness could be a tool to get stronger and the resilience that came off that. And like sort of it became, this great analogy for life that everything is thrown at you. You just find a way to get it done. And half the time you're not ready for anything. And a
Yeah,
lot of the
that's
time
true.
you have no idea of what you're truly capable of being able to do until you have to do it. And then you're like, holy shit, I never realized I could do that. And that's sort of like that empowerment, that sense of empowerment that one I'd found when I was 15, when I started at the gym training myself. And then two, when I'd sort of revisited it all these years later, I was like, this empowerment, how good I feel, this is something that I can give to others. And it just became this sort of love affair with seeing how far I could take other people. And, now training people, and it's so rewarding, especially for females. Have a female come into the gym with really low self-esteem or low self-confidence, and then have her lift weights. And, watching how when she becomes empowered in her training, how that then translates into the change in her attitude towards the rest of her life. That's a beautiful thing to see, and I'm really lucky that I get to do that. And I had such this incredible experience when I was 15 years old. Stepping into a gym changed my life for the better. And now I'm in a position to give that experience to other people who are coming and looking for something,
I
and that's
love
cool.
this. You talk about pushing yourself to the limit,
Mm.
and I am no stranger to that feeling. Back in 2015, though, you had to get a hip replacement surgery, and
Yeah.
then you had to be resuscitated 4 times on the operating table. Can you talk about the moments leading up to the surgery? What happened to cause that, and then you know how your views on life changed afterwards.
God, this was like the second pivot moment for me. Yeah, look, in the space of, I've always said, you know, I identify as being an athlete, somebody who's very physically strong. Like when I feel physically strong, I think strong thoughts. That's something that drives me. And I remember I'd done a squat session one day and I'd walked away from the squat session feeling like, my hip doesn't feel that great. And, you're an athlete, you push through stuff all the time. You're like, it's all good, just keep going. It'll fix itself over the next couple of days. And, invariably, when you do a lot of training, you have niggles in your lower back, you have niggles in your knees, you have niggles in your hips. And I just kind of thought it would go away. Like I stuck my head in the sand like an ostrich. And over the next, couple of weeks, it was still painful in my hip. I went and saw physios, I went and saw chiros, I went to a soft tissue masseuse. And initially, a couple of the treatments sort of relieved the pain a little bit, but then the pain would shift. So it started off on my lower back. It became harder to get out of bed in the morning. And I was like, oh, I must be really just tight. So I started stretching more. And then the pain shifted to like my groin. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. Why am I sore there? And then it just started this ache down my whole leg. And the physio had said to me, he was like, look, we're not making any more gains on your recovery here through soft tissue stuff because whatever we do, it just comes back twofold the next week. Like you probably should go and get an MRI and get it checked out. So I was like, okay, cool. So I went to a doctor to get a referral for an MRI, and he's not a fitness guy at all, but he's like, look, while you're getting the MRI, he's like, I think you've torn the labrum in your hip. That's what all the symptoms are pointing to, but go and get an x-ray at the same time because it's free and you may as well. You're far too young to have anything wrong with your bones, but just go and get the x-ray just in case. And I was like, cool, no worries. So I went and got the x-ray and the MRI, and when I came back the week after, he was like, yep, okay, so you've torn the labrum top and bottom. Not only that, you've got degenerative osteoarthritis in your hip. So you basically have the hip of a 65-year-old. And I was like 37. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, what exactly does that mean? He was like, well, it's progressive and it's degenerative. So there's a genetic component. My dad also had 2 hip replacements. He was like, so you're going to have to make a choice at some point in terms of your treatment prognosis, because at the moment, because you've torn the labrum top and bottom, there is no buffering. It is bone on bone. And because it's bone on bone, it's eroding the head of your femur, which is why you are now in pain. I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. So within the space of 8 months, I went from being somebody who is very competitive and at the peak of her game to somebody who couldn't even walk across the room unassisted. Like I would take 4 steps down the road and I would be in absolute agony, like crying, being like, nobody talk to me. Please don't anybody talk to me because I can't manage it. I'm in so much pain. I don't even know what to do with myself. And if you've ever been in a position where you're in pain, you're taking painkillers, and then all of a sudden the painkillers don't work anymore, you've taken that many of them that you're completely desensitized. And I was at that point where I was like, there is no escaping this. And not only this, I can't train. I'm completely isolated, which means I'm feeling completely disconnected from everybody. I can't do the self-care, which is all the things in life that bring me joy, because all the things that bring me joy in life are now really freaking painful. I can't sleep because I'm in consistent pain. And I remember just going to the gym one day, and one of the members who's like, he's the guy that's always like, if you're like, how are you today? He's like, I'm fucking awesome. And you're like, yeah, you are. So am I. And that energy exchange was great. And he just goes, Alexa, you look really flat. And I just lost it. I was like, you don't understand. I've never been in this much pain. I have no energy to be positive. Like, stop expecting me to be having a good time every freaking day. And I'd never lost it like that. And one of the trainers pulled me aside and he was like, is there anything that I can do for you? And I was like, don't treat me like a victim. And I was like, I just need you to train me. I need you to train me. I need to feel physically capable. And some days I would crawl out of the gym like he did that. There was only certain things I could do by that stage. I could do some glute bridges. I could do some hip extension, like trap bar deadlifts. I could do some half range RDLs, like random stuff. Couldn't stand on one leg anymore. Couldn't walk. Couldn't do any cardio. But I could do some upper body stuff. Could do some pull-ups, whatever. And I was like, I just need to feel strong. And for me, like there were days when I would crawl out of the gym because I was in pain, but there was nothing that I could do physically that was going to make the injury any worse than it already was. I just had to choose to deal with the pain. But the physical pain was eclipsed by the psychological strength that I felt from being able to do something physically challenging. And that's when I knew, I was like, this is what fitness has done for me. Like I can tap into how psychologically strong and mentally tough and resilient I am and use it to drive the pain away, use it to manage the pain. Anyway, it got to a point where I just couldn't walk at all. And I would sit in a corner and I would yell at my clients across the room. And I saw 5 orthopedic surgeons. They were like, look, you're at a point now, you just have no other alternative. Like if you want to walk again, you're going to have to get a full hip replacement. I was like, okay, this sucks, but okay, I'm an athlete. I got this. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get surgery. I'm going to come out. I'm going to go through my rehab. I'm going to be bionic. Like literally, this is going to be epic. It's going to be fine. I should have known that nothing ever bloody goes to plan. So on August the 12th, 2017 at 8 a.m. in the morning, I went in to get this hip replacement done. And at 12 p.m., I woke up in ICU on a breathing tube with 3 of my best mates standing over my hospital bed, like bawling their eyes out. Like these are, when you write down your emergency contacts, like your people, yeah, these people have been pulled off planes, away from jobs, like come across the country because the doctors are like, your mate's in big trouble here. You're going to have to come. So they're all standing there just waiting. And I wake up just seeing them and I'm like, what the hell happened to my dad? Like, what's going on here? Breathing tube in, couldn't breathe, panicked. They knocked me out again. Wake up in ICU and it's a bit quieter. And the surgeon's standing there and he's like crying. And he's with the anesthetist and he's like, look, we've got some bad news. And I was like, well, obviously I'm in ICU. He's like, we couldn't do your hip. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, why? He's like, because you died on the table. So I had, when you go in for surgery, you have like, a few injections, injection in your hand to give you, to put, local anesthetic or a local injection so that you can get like a spinal injection so that they can put you under and do all the other things. I had all of that and I was in the actual operating theater and they put the IV in with my antibiotics and I'd had an anaphylactic reaction to the antibiotics. And so I'd flatlined and in the space of, 4 minutes or so, they had to resuscitate me 4 times because I just wouldn't respond. My lungs wouldn't breathe by themselves. So I was on steroids for a week, just pumping my lungs up because they didn't want to breathe. It's one of my friends was documenting what had happened while this was going on. Like Alexa's gone into surgery. Alexa's getting resuscitated right now. I think she's going to be fine. We're at the hospital kind of thing. And I had, when I woke up, 137 DMs on Instagram basically being like, did you see Jesus? Did you have a conversation with God? Was there a white light? Did you get abducted by aliens? Like, what was your afterlife experience? And I felt like such a failure because I was like, I had none of that. I didn't see anything. I don't remember any of it. But what I do remember was this absolute moment of clarity when I woke up. And that's the only way I can explain it because all of a sudden, like, and I'm not religious by any means. Like I don't subscribe to a specific religion apart from I know there's a higher power and I know I live by my moral code, right? So I didn't really know where this purpose had come from. All I knew, I was like, this is what I'm here to do. And the last thing that I had done before I went into surgery was deliver a mental health presentation at a school in Townsville. And up here, like the suicide rate is fairly high. And in Townsville, it's one of the highest rates of suicide in Australia. It's a military affiliated school. There's a big Indigenous population. And one of the girls that I had spoken to had basically lost 3 people in the space of a year to suicide. And as I was delivering my presentation, sharing my story, which we've already discussed, I was watching this girl in the front row, and she was like head in hands, bawling her eyes out. And I was like, oh God, I could be in real trouble here. Like I've obviously triggered something. And she waited until everybody had gone. And then she came up to me and she gave me the biggest, the most beautiful hug. And she was like, I just wanted to say thank you. I was like, okay, you're welcome. Like I was just sharing my story, like, and she's like, no, I don't think you understand. Today you saved my life. Like, okay, not really sure what to say. She was like, today was the day I was going to kill myself. But listening to you share your story has made me realize that I'm not alone and I'm going to ask for help. I've still got the photo on my phone, like phenomenal moment for me. But that moment, like that conversation was the first thing that I remembered when I woke up in ICU. And I was like, this is what I am meant to do. These are the conversations that I am meant to be having, because, and it just got me thinking that, you just have no idea in every single moment, like every single person with every single interaction that you have. And it could be as simple as just a smile at someone or genuinely asking how someone is, how your barista's day is, or your Uber driver, like genuinely connecting with somebody, giving somebody a hug. In every single moment, every single interaction, you have this incredible ability to make somebody's day, change the course of somebody's life, or save it. And what a gift to have. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to use this gift. I want to use this gift and I want to inspire more people to have more conversations that could save lives. And that's sort of where we are now.
This is the purpose of this podcast, and that's actually how this came about. Is because I had the same feeling in my moments of, I had a blood clot when I had surgery. I was in a wheelchair for 6 months, and all this. I mean, I'm 6'11", so you can't really see how tall I am right now, but I'm 6'11". So I really
Wow.
felt like God changed my whole perspective. I know you're not religious, but, my perspective was changed. I'm 6'11", walking through life, and now I'm in a wheelchair for 6 months. And so what's that, 4'11", 4 feet tall, whatever it is. And at the time, like, I kept trying to find the reason why. And over the course of time, there's been moments like that with the woman where I've shared my story and it's changed somebody's life. Somebody said, well, I was same scenario where somebody wanted to take their lives, or they were just dealing with something they couldn't handle, and they heard my story and it's like, wow, I got to keep pushing now. That feels like purpose.
Yeah.
What is purpose to you?
Ooh, I think purpose is having something to get up for every day, like knowing why you're here and knowing what you have to give. For me, my purpose is to help as many people as I can. That's what my life is about. If you took that away from me, I don't know what my life would look like. I couldn't imagine living a life where I wasn't able to empower somebody else to make better choices or live better or want to be here. Or, I couldn't imagine not being around to inspire more people to take chances or have great adventures or challenge themselves or want to look further at their own potential. And it's funny, I was in the mines doing having conversations about mental health, and after I'd just done this presentation in a wet mess, and really interesting place to do a conversation about mental health while everyone's getting drunk. But anyway, this older gentleman came up to me at the end of the presentation, and he was like an ex-military guy, and he just started chatting to me, and he was like, this is the first time I've ever really spoken to anyone about what I've been through. And he had lost 9 friends to suicide. And I was just sitting there thinking, holy shit, like, do I have 9 friends? This is hectic. Like, I was
Jeez.
like, how are you? And he was like, well, I've tried 3 times. And he was like, I just feel
Oh.
like I have no purpose. And I was like, okay. And I sat there and I was like, all right, what if your purpose was to share your story so that somebody else out there, somebody who could be really struggling right now, what if your purpose was to share your story so that person could hear it and realize that they could absolutely deal with whatever was thrown at them and it could save their life? Would that be a pretty cool purpose? And he was like, yes. I was like, so that could be your purpose. And it was just one of those moments, like I really had to sit there and think about it, but that's what it is. Like you get to choose to have those, like what a cool purpose it is. And like everybody could choose to have that purpose if they wanted to, you know?
I had an episode with there was a guy who he was really struggling. He had quite a few bad string of incidents happen in his life. His lover left him, mom committed suicide. There's a bunch of things that happened, and he was also on the verge of giving up. And I have something that somebody said to me a long time ago that I shared with him. I said, "Listen, someone told me this a long time ago, and I had some issues in my past that also made me on the verge of suicide. But they said before you even think about it, give everything that you have to other people before you even decide that this is what you want to do. Give your resources, give your time, give your efforts, give it to other people. Give the things that you have, the abilities that you have to other people, and give them a chance." And I told him this, and he took the advice, and he was somber, and he left, and came back months later and talked about how, man, like he feels like he found his purpose. This is the thing I've been wanting to do. And the idea is, like, you just have no idea how you impact other people's life. It's kind of like the movie It's a Wonderful Life, right? The guy wanted to take his life because he's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And they showed him, listen, this is how you impact other people. This is what their lives would look like if you weren't here. And we just have no idea what we do for people in their lives. Like we have, even us having this conversation, you have no idea who's going to hear this and is going to be affected by just a conversation by two people on the internet. So for me, I feel like the lens shift always has to be around the impact that we're making.
100%. And I couldn't think of like a greater purpose than that, like honestly. But I mean, I know so many people that everything they do is geared around, like in my industry, especially like fitness and health, it's all geared around trying to have an impact on how somebody else lives their life, giving them a better quality of life. It's why you do what you do. So yeah, no, I don't think there could be a greater purpose than that.
I love that writing is now such a big part of what you do,
Mm.
right? A big part of your life. I would love to know what it's like to share your stories with people. But also, there is an article that you wrote, amazing article, where you talk about being single for 10 years, that you will no longer allow yourself to be treated poorly.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel like, for one, sharing your story that way, is there feedback that you have gotten that makes you feel like being that vulnerable is worth it? Well, no, let me rephrase. Have you gotten feedback that has meant a lot to you? Because I feel like when we are being vulnerable, kind of like you were with your speech, when you just broke down and told people, hey, this is what I am, I feel like you connect with people better.
Yeah.
And so how has your writing impacted other people?
I had so much good feedback from that article, and it was kind of like way off topic from what I would usually do. Like it was a big diversion over here somewhere, but so many people related to it. And I had so many messages from guys as well. I mean, also the odd dodgy DM that was like, "Hi dear." I'm like, no, this is not where I was going with this article.
You're single, so I mean, at least you told them you're single.
Yeah, no. Yeah, but I actually had a bunch of emails from guys too, being like, there was some really great insight in there. And the fun part was that like, obviously, because I didn't name and shame, I was like, everyone should be like, you should be scared. But there was one part where I mentioned, that we're talking about marriage proposals, and I was like, oh, at least I knew that it had to be more romantic than a footy player, offering to marry you so he could get a British passport kind of thing. Anyway, I put the story up like on all of my platforms, and it was on LinkedIn. And I got a message from the guy who I was talking about. And he was like, "Oh my God, Alexa, that was such a great read." And I'm like, "Do you realize that was you? Like, that was you in that story. I'm really glad you enjoyed it."
Wow.
But yeah, look, I did. And I mean, that could be a mantra for anything in life. Like, you can go through life wondering why things happen to you all the time. You can go through life wondering why people treat you a certain way, or why you keep ending up in shitty situations, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, there's only so much of things that can happen to you before you realize that it's your choices that allow you to feel a certain way about something, or it's your choices that are putting you in that situation in the first place. And for me, like, I have no boundaries. I say yes to everything. I always want to help everybody. And so I ended up in a dating pattern where I would just end up with guys who were very broken in very bad situations, who wanted to be inspired. They wanted a life aspiration, and they saw me living a really healthy life. I've got sober. I've dealt with my demons. I've come out the other side. And for them, that's a really, you know, holy shit, she could potentially fix me, or she looks like she's living a really happy, joyous, fulfilled life. I want to be part of that. And then when they sit down and they get involved in it, they realize, oh no, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work because I actually have to sit here and look at exactly who I am to be part of this. It's not just as easy as deciding one day that you're going to be really happy and joyous and life is sunshine and roses. Like, it doesn't work like that. And, you know, I just fell into this familiar pattern. I always wanted to help people. I always wanted to give everything I had. But in the end of it, like, the epiphany moment was like, far out. Why am I allowing this? Because that's essentially what's happening. I am allowing this. I'm allowing myself to be put in these situations. I'm allowing these people to treat me a certain way, and that has to stop. And it did. And it's great. And I've never looked back. And like I said in my article, I haven't had a date since either, but who cares? I have a cat.
That's what is that? I'm trying to figure out what that says about us men. If you're saying that, I'm saying that I will not allow myself to be treated poorly. And since I said that, I haven't had a date since. Like, what does that say about us men? And are there no good men in Australia? What? Let's put it out there. What's the deal?
Could get political. No.
Oh
Look,
man.
for me, I think it comes with, I didn't really have any self-esteem. And I think sometimes you get to a point, especially I mean, I'm 43 now, and you get to a point where you've been told all through your life that there's a certain timeline that you have to abide by in order to be successful. You grow up, you get a job, you meet somebody, you settle down, you have a family, you have some kids, there's a white picket fence, maybe there's a dog, there's retirement, you have some adventures as a family or whatever it is. Like, then you retire and you have these investments, and that's your life. And that's what it means to be successful. I sort of feel like if you're not at that point, sometimes it can really get you down, especially because society can be very judgmental. And if you're weighed down by other people's opinions, or like, for a long time, I felt like I was a failure, like I've achieved in my professional life. I've, dealt with some pretty good demons in my personal life, but my relationship side of things, I'm an absolute failure. Like, I haven't had a serious relationship in a long period of time. And why aren't I married? And why can't I get a date? And I think because of that, you forget that you deserve to be treated a certain way, and you just accept whatever is given to you, and you just accept that as your lot. Because what happens if nothing better comes along? You're going to be alone for the rest of your life. And I think a lot of that comes down to people don't necessarily want to be alone. Like, humans, the foundation of the human experience is connection. So if you haven't found a way to connect with yourself, or you haven't found a way to connect with the people around you outside of having a romantic relationship, that can be really tough. So you just settle. I don't want to ever settle. And I think that was the realization. It was like, I don't ever want to feel like I settled for anything less than extraordinary. And I think that's what everybody deserves, but it's not always the easiest road.
What does extraordinary look like? Because we're going to turn this into a Rebuilding the Beast dating show, okay? Action Alexa.
Awesome.
I mean,
don't take dating advice from me.
What is extraordinary for you? Just in case, Mr. Right and Miss Prince Charming is watching this, and he's like, man, I can't seem to the same way. It's like, dude, I've been single for a little while as well, and I have these things, and I'm looking for this person with these characteristics, and I can't seem to find her. What if he's looking at you and saying that you're the person? What does extraordinary look like for you?
I don't know. I've never met it yet. Like, I think it's different for everybody. I think people get so focused on having a checklist of things that you need to have done, like a set of qualifications or a set of prerequisites that you have to have in order to meet this level of extraordinary. And I don't think it works like that. Like, for me, it would just be how somebody makes me feel about myself. if I feel extraordinary when I'm with somebody and I want to make them feel extraordinary in return, and together we get to do extraordinary things and have the adventure of a lifetime, then that would be my version of extraordinary. I don't like the idea of settling down. I like the idea of sharing with someone and being challenged by someone and being inspired by someone and empowered by someone, and in return giving those things back and being able to have the adventure of a lifetime. Like that for me would be extraordinary.
Amazing. Wow.
So
Well,
profound.
you really are. You really are. I have had such a blast listening to you on this podcast, and I feel like at some point I felt like I was listening to you talk to me. It was like a therapy session for me of
I'll send you the
wow.
invoice.
Yes. Please do. Please do. I always end every podcast with this question.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh, no.
it's one of my favorites. It's a question for you to reflect on your journey so far, right? You now, with all the titles and accolades and all the things that you do as Superwoman, writer, model, fitness trainer, celebrity fitness trainer, can't forget that part, and all the different sports teams that you've worked with as well. If you could talk to younger Alexa, given everything that she's also been through and the life journey, everything we've talked about with parents and your own personal journey, what would you say to little Alexa?
I would say just know that this too shall pass. Be kind to yourself and be kind to everybody else around you, because you have no idea of the battles that everybody else is facing. And I would say that every time you go through something, just remember you are not struggling, you are being challenged.
Be kind to yourself. You are not struggling. You're being challenged. And be kind to everyone else. Wow. That is amazing. Thank you so much for your
You are
time.
so welcome.
This incredible time difference that we're dealing with right now from California to Australia is amazing. But you made time, and I really appreciate it, especially on a weekend.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, the more conversations that we can have to inspire others to lead extraordinary lives, the better, hey?
Yes, yes. So all you guys listening, go rebuild the beast and go follow Action Alexa. Please tell us where to find you. Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, OnlyFans, whatever you got. Talk to me.
Yeah, if you want photos of my feet, go through OnlyFans. No, I'm kidding. Probably Action Alexa on Insta is probably the easiest. And then I'll get everyone, if they want to send any marriage proposals, they can go through you.
Oh, yes. Marriage proposals come to
You can weed them all out.
I got you. No problem. Yo, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I won't take any more of your time. This has been incredible. Wow. I'm blown away, and I can't wait to share your story. This is really inspiring. Please keep going, because man, we need more inspiring, strong women that don't take being treated poorly as the norm. I have a sister, I have mom, I have cousins, all the things. So, we need role models like you. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're so very welcome. And just to clarify though, men do get treated poorly too. So I don't want to just say that this is like a female thing, but
yeah. I know, that's why I was listening. I was like, wow,
good.
She's talking about me.
No, thank you so much. Well, hopefully the next time we see each other will be in person. I'm due to come out to LA. It's one of my favorite places, and we can do a speaking thing.
Or a workout, whatever you got for me. Just don't kill me like you do the people. Just, take it easy on me. I am a retired athlete now.
I don't make any guarantees, man.
No, thank you. I don't really know. I think I'm supposed to hang up, but like when you hang up, you're supposed to leave the thing up for a second so it can load your part of the whole thing. But like I said again, thank you, and I'm gonna stay in touch through social media, however. And, if you're ever here or if I'm ever there, I will be sure to look you up.
100%. Cool. You have a beautiful day. Go work on that day.
Hey, Festus here. I hope you liked that episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and here's some more episodes that you might like. On this side.